The information provided is not a substitute for legal and other professional advice where the facts and circumstances warrant. People should always consult their own legal or other professional advisors and discuss the facts and circumstances that apply to their specific circumstances. The information shared on Ask the Landlord is for educational purposes only.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Ask the Landlord with your favorite landlord, Albert Dweck. I'm Melissa. I'm one of Albert's producers and a former New York City renter. And together, we're going to be asking this landlord some questions. All right, Albert, today is going to be a little bit different this episode. There's a lot of terms in the rental world in New York City. A lot of big terms. Some I know because I've rented before, but I don't know all of them. And I just want you to define them and we can talk about them. And so let's just jump right in. The first term is, can you explain what is a guarantor?
That's a good question. And I know these terms are like, it's like a different language sometimes. And that's what it is. You know, it's a discourse like leasing an apartment or, dealing with real estate. It's something that you're like, oh, it's not something people do every day. And there's terms that get thrown around and it's helpful to know what they mean. So a guarantor is someone who guarantees payment of an obligation, very simply, right? So usually when there's a loan or a contract where you need someone to fulfill on the promise they're looking for, who's the person that's signing it, who's guaranteeing these payments, right? So when you're leasing an apartment, usually the requirements are you have to have a certain credit score and you have to be earning a certain amount of money, and there might be other requirements, but those are the two that typically come up. And then if those criteria are met where you're a passable candidate, then you're the guarantor of the payments, right? But let's say you're moving from out of the country, and you don't have a credit score that's like in the United States, or this is your first job, right? And you don't have credit, so maybe you need someone to be a guarantor with you, right? Someone that has like a parent or guardian or whatever that can also sign on your lease with you. So that would be a guarantor, a co-guarantor.
Does the guarantor have to be a relative if it's not yourself?
It could be anyone that's willing to take on the obligation.
Wow.
That meets it, obviously.
Interesting.
There are also services today where you can actually buy insurance where, a company can be the guarantor.
How long has that been around, that an outside company?
A few years.
So it's recent. So it's recent. Wow. Interesting.
It's like insurance. So one way would be like, let's say your rent is $2,000. These companies almost have like an insurance premium that you pay so that they insure you paying the rent.
Wow. Do you see those as being successful in the future? As lasting? Are they going to last? What do you think?
Yeah, we've used them successfully.
Wow.
Those services so far. And the problem is that they don't take everybody. So very often you need a guarantor too. But it's another option that certainly widens the opportunities for people to be able to afford.
Wow.
So that's what a guarantor is: someone who guarantees the payment of an obligation, secures that, or make sure that a promise is fulfilled. And then in the context of renting, usually it's if a person themselves who's renting can't pass the credit or whatever that the landlord has, then they might need an additional person to sign on to the lease financially. Mm-hmm. So that's where that comes in.
All right, I have a curveball question. So let's say I'm I'm renting an apartment. I did really well. I don't need a guarantor. Boom, I lost my job. Do I have to, and let's say I have some savings. Do I need to then get a guarantor for a renewal?
After the lease is, not usually.
No.
Not
All right.
usually, because usually it's what happens is, good question. What happens is, let's say you paid your rent the whole time,
Mm-hmm.
and the landlord really wouldn't. They would use your past history as an indication of how you're doing in the future.
Right.
Obviously, things happen, but
Of course.
not usual that the landlord would require that again on the renewal.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So I've seen this term a little bit currently, and I think it's been around, but I don't really know what it is. What does net effective rent mean?
Net effective rent. So, it's good. Let's say a rent is being advertised for $2,000. Okay.
Okay.
But the landlord decides to, in order, and let's say, it's at a slow time or a bad season, and the landlord wants to offer an incentive, a one-time thing. So maybe they give you 1 month's. It comes with 1 month free, let's say, right?
Okay.
So then you say, okay, so then your rent, your gross rent is $2,000 a month,
Okay. How many are we
right?
talking?
But
12 months?
yeah, let's say 12 months,
Okay.
right? So then, but you're getting 1 month free.
Okay. So
So your net
13
effective
months?
rent is, could be that way. Let's just do it on 11 months because it's easier to do for
Okay.
a second.
12 to 11. Got it.
$2,000 times 12 is 24, right?
Right.
And times
Yeah.
11 is 22,000.
Okay.
So really, if I said to you, sign a 1-year lease, we'll give you 1 month free out of the 12, right? So you're only paying for 11 months, right? So your net effective rent would be 20. You're only paying 22,000,
Right.
2,000 times 11,
Right.
but you would divide that by 12. So your
Right.
net effective rent is 1833.
So would the landlord advertise the rent as 2,000 a month or as 18 and change?
Sometimes they would advertise it as the 18 and change because that would be like a promotional price to advertise. That would be the net effective rent. So someone says, "Oh, your rent is 2,000, but it's only going to be for 11 months." So, but so and then what happens is, "Oh, do I pay?" Your answer is, "Do I pay like 1833 a month instead of the 2,000 since I'm getting a month free, or do I pay 2,000 for 11 months?" I mean, that would be
Right.
an arrangement you have with your landlord.
Right. 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, as my mom
Yeah,
says.
yeah. Yeah, and then when you get to, sometimes landlords say, "You know what? You'll do a 12-month lease, and I'll give you the 13-month for free." Things like that. So
Yeah, that's nice
that's.
too.
But again, you just do the math and take it off the gross rent. So the gross rent in this example is 2,000, and then you would deduct it and then say, "Oh, look, I it says 2,000, but I got a month free, so I'm really paying, whatever." This amount, 1833, is my net effective rent.
Right. So during the past 2 years when, the market was crazy because of the C word, um, I was seeing things advertised as like 3 months rent free and right. It was what was like the craziest thing you offered or saw in terms of net effective?
Yeah, I mean, people gave up to 30% discounts. I mean, to keep places
Right.
full, or whatever incentive they had to do to get some cash flow, or renters, were just having a hard time and they needed help. So whatever, it was just a survival mode, and people working together to get through a very difficult time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we survived. So, okay. Are there any other incentives? Like, is there a situation where a landlord will offer free water or free gas, or is always just the rent?
Yeah, I mean, a landlord could offer utilities to be included.
What about a
There,
monthly
sometimes
flower?
build monthly
Flowers.
buildings have sometimes some amenities. that landlords sometimes charge extra for. Those can be included or not. Some buildings have gyms and, business centers and lounges, and, those things are places where landlords can offer those as allowing residents to use those as incentives.
Okay. That's going to last forever? That it will always exist? Just like being
What do you
able,
mean?
like landlords offering some sort of incentive. Hopefully that will always
No.
exist. No,
it doesn't happen now. I mean,
Oh.
demand is very high and there's no incentives,
I'm making a
So-
sad face for all those listening.
No, but it doesn't matter. You're just asking me what a word means.
Right.
So will the word exist? Yes, the word will exist. And will there be a math calculation to find out how much rent you're paying? Always? Yes.
Of course.
Those will always be there. Will the amount that landlords offer or that tenants are willing to pay fluctuate? Yes.
Okay.
That will always be there.
Always. All right. And let's do one more term. What is a sublease or subletting an apartment? Like, what does that mean?
So subleasing, obviously, you're leasing the apartment from the landlord or owner of the building, so that you have a lease, right? Then let's say that you wanted to lease your apartment to somebody else. That's called a sublease, right? Usually, you have to get the landlord's permission to sublease your apartment.
What happens if I don't?
It's usually a problem with your lease. Most leases don't allow for the sublease without the landlord's permission. Obviously, people do it. If there's no problem, it's no problem. But usually, people, and these days, there's all kinds of laws with short-term rentals and things like that you have to be very aware of. So most leases have restrictions on subleasing without the approval of the landlord. So you could think about it. The landlord contracted with you, right, Melissa, let's say, to rent the apartment. Again, let's say for $2,000. So the landlord did the work and you did the work to say, look, I want to rent this apartment. I want to rent this apartment for this long. Now, I understand things change, but that's fine. And the landlord went to check your background, your ability to pay, who you are, et cetera. And then all of a sudden, you decided without telling the landlord to put someone else in, and but that might be fine if you tell the landlord, hey, I'm going to put this person in. Here's their requirements. Who's who they are. Okay. The landlord, that might work, but you have to give the landlord wants to make sure they're getting paid, but ultimately also who's responsible to the landlord? You are, right? As a renter. So if you find someone that doesn't pay you, and then you can't pay the landlord because of that, that's your problem and the landlord's problem.
Does this fall under the category of, let's say I have a year-long lease, I got a new job, there are 3 months left on the lease, and instead of subletting for those 3 months, I find a person, I want them to take over my lease. Would it be a sublet?
That's a sublet.
It would just be a sublet, and then they would.
That's a sublet, or you tell the landlord, I have someone that wants to take over, the remaining obligation of the lease.
Mm-hmm.
You could do that, but again, with the landlord's permission.
Right. No, of course. Is that an option?
Sure.
So that's a good way to get out of your lease if you take that responsibility.
Find someone else is a very find a qualified renter to take over. Absolutely.
That's making an offer.
I mean, as long as it's okay with the landlord, that's an offer.
Right. That's making a good offer.
That's right.
So subletting is pretty common, right? I remember the term was very common back in my day.
Yeah, very much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Albert. That was really good. I know future episodes will definitely have more terms that come up, and maybe we'll form a glossary or an index of all these rental and real estate terms that are specific to New York, but also nationwide, right? Because
it's good for people to understand what those are about. So
absolutely. Just give you all the options. Thank you so much,
right.
Albert. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
For more episodes, please subscribe to Ask the Landlord on your favorite podcast platform. We'd appreciate it if you left a review on Apple Podcasts. If you'd like to watch the show, check out our Ask the Landlord YouTube channel. If you have a question for Albert, feel free to contact him on Instagram at Ask the Landlord. And check out his TikTok at Ask the Landlord. Bridging the gap between landlords and tenants, this has been Ask the Landlord. Thanks for listening.